Hello and welcome to TAL Radio. At TAL, we connect those who are willing to give to those who are in need. And as I always say, giving is not an easy thing. There are very few chosen people in this world who can really, without expecting anything in return, they really are very selfless in nature and are able to give. You're listening to a beautiful series called Self Coaching. And we talk about self coaching. The only person that comes to my mind is Andrew Talent. It's my pleasure to have Andrew back with me on Tal Radio. And today we would be diving about, in fact, we would not be just be diving onto, but also indulging and talking a lot about, Andrew,
Values.
values. Yes, core values and why they are important and how are they important to self-coaching. So, Andrew, welcome to Tal Radio. Pleasure to have you once again with us.
Yeah, great to be with you again, Sandy.
Thank you so much. So let's start. And could you just explain what exactly core values are and why are they so essential in self-coaching?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to really just start with being very clear about what we're talking about today. So, what we're not talking about is the values that human beings hold in terms of integrity, honesty, presence. Those things are really important as human beings. The values we're talking about today, the core values, are why we do things. So, if you remember from the last episode, we talked about who am I, and we explored the behaviors around that. And that's how we do things. But actually, at an unconscious level, we actually do things because we have values and make judgments around those. So what I'm going to do is explain very briefly what the 7 values are that human beings tend to buy into, and that enables them to make decisions about what they're doing. And this goes back about 100 years. So the actual research from this started in about 1928 with a German psychologist called Edward Spranger. In the 1950s, Gordon Allport expanded upon this and built up the model further. And then more recently, in the last 20 years, a gentleman called Jerry Donaldson has expanded this model to what it is today. So I'm going to start by explaining the model and how people can relate to it. And again, like we did last time, Sandy, I'm sure you'll be saying, yes, that's me. And it's important to understand of the 7 values I'm going to talk about and why they're important, there are usually 3 as a human being that we actually find very, very important to us, and they drive decisions about why we do things. So can I explain them very briefly?
Absolutely, we would love to hear. I'm dying to hear them, actually.
Exactly. And you'll relate to these. So the first one, I'm going to name the actual value and then give it a descriptor so you can relate to it. So the first one is aesthetic value. So beauty comes to mind immediately. So aesthetic value is all about what's important to me, if this is really core for me as a value, is that I need everything to be in balance. So what that means is in my life, I need to have harmony. I need to have strong relationships. I need to feel that there's a lot of kindness around, that there's not much conflict. In my workspace, it's all very neat and tidy. It's actually everything's got a place. Everything has to have its place in terms of it being that kind of harmonious way for me. And what it also means is that in my teams that I manage or lead, I need to have harmony amongst the teams as well. I need them to all get on very well and work together well. So the aesthetic value is all about harmony. And when I have that value close to me and I don't have it in my life and there's lots of conflict or things that aren't in balance, I get disrupted and I feel disconnected. So that's the first value, aesthetic. The second value, yeah, good, and you'll hopefully one of these will resonate with you. The second one is called altruistic. Now, you'll know this one. Altruistic value is all about the reasons I make decisions in life with everything I do is so that other people around me can benefit from them. So that's not just about charity work or volunteer work. It's actually every single day in our relationships with people we love, people in our teams, we are always making decisions to choose certain outcomes because other people will benefit, not just us. And so that's our altruistic value. And if we're not able to be like that in our work environments because people stop us or work environments stop us, again, we feel a disconnect. That's the second one, altruistic. The third one is an interesting one, and it's called economic. Now, economic value is about 2 things. It means either what's important to me is how successful I am viewed in life by other people, or how successful I am financially. It could be either of those, it could be both, but that's how I judge decisions I make, I might make this decision over here because I think I'm going to be successful. And I'm not going to make that decision over there because I think I'm going to be unsuccessful. And it drives the way that we actually make these decisions. So that's the third one. Hope you're keeping up. Economic.
And especially when you said, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but economics is something that I think the world is standing on its feet for that. We
Absolutely.
are literally working and slogging every day. Probably
Absolutely.
we've kept it at forefront. For what reason? Not sure, but we have really kept it at forefront in our lives.
We have. And some people feel very comfortable with that because the value sits with them nicely, and other people it won't. There's a disconnect again. So the fourth one, and I love this one because I didn't know I had this one as my value until I discovered it through the profiling, which I'll talk about later. And this value is called individualistic. Now, it doesn't sound very nice because it sounds almost like being selfish, but it
True.
isn't. Individualistic value is all about the way that I want people to judge me for who I am is because of the opinions I offer to people. So if you have this as a really important value, it means you are very opinionated. And whether somebody doesn't want it or not, you're going to offer your opinion on something because that's the way you have value in your life by people listening to you. So you can relate to this. We have people around us that's now.
Too much relatable.
Exactly. Now, don't forget, you probably might go into politics if you have this as a really clear value, because that is a forum where you can offer your opinion all the time. So that's the fourth one, getting there. The fifth one's really interesting for many people listening to this, and it's called political value. Now, this is not about politics. The way I'm going to describe political value is it's very important to me, if I have this as a value, for me to be in charge of my own destiny. And I don't want anybody else deciding that for me. So, for example, if I'm in a work environment and I have a manager that's micromanaging me and deciding the way I do my work, if I have this as a really key value in terms of political value, it means there's going to be a disconnect because I don't have the freedom to operate in the way I want to. What many entrepreneurs have if they set up their own businesses as a key core value is political value, because they've worked out in life that the only way I can get that is by having my own business with all the risk that's involved, because nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm in charge of my own destiny. So that's quite interesting.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So that's the fifth one. We've got two more to go, and then we can break them down in terms of how these manifest and what it means in our daily lives. The sixth one's really interesting, and I'm sure that a lot of people listening to this and watching this will relate to this one. It's called theoretical. And what this means is if this value is really important to me as theoretical, it means I do things because I'm always going to learn something new. So if I've got two projects that you might ask me to do, one of them, I've done it before, and the other one, it's nice and shiny and brand new, I'm going to learn something, my unconscious value will point me to that one because I'm going to learn. And so the theoretical value is all about our ability to learn. And sometimes we disconnect from this in work because we stop learning. We can't learn anymore. There's no opportunity. And suddenly there's a big disconnect because that value is not there anymore in terms of our workplace. So that's the sixth one. And then the final one, it's a really interesting one, which a lot of people hold dear, and it's called traditional value. So what traditional value is all about is I am a person that really values having systems around me, structures, so that I know my place in the world. And I feel safe and I feel secure knowing my place in the world and knowing where I can move to in that structure to feel safe. So a lot of people that have grown up in families in the military, in medicine, in the legal system, there's quite a lot of structure in those particular industries. And people who move into those tend to have that kind of traditional value. So they are the seven values. And you're probably thinking, of the people listening to this, oh, well, which two or three are the ones that drive me?
True. I'm
What are
sure.
yours? What are yours?
I would say one would be political, that I know this is my destiny and I'm going to lead it my way. Nobody can tell me what to do. Other is aesthetics.
Yes.
I need harmony
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And one is, I think the last one is traditional.
Yeah.
And why I would say because I belong to a military family.
There you go. Lovely. Well, it's lovely you can relate to that. And why I love this value system, which we'll talk about how you can access very shortly, is it immediately gives you a sense of, if you know they are your top two or three that you can relate to, in terms of the role that you currently do in life, whether that's in family again or professionally, going back to the wheel of life, does that enable me to live those values every day? And if it does, it's probably congruent with how you're feeling and your authenticity. You're probably feeling content. And if you're not, you feel a disconnect in some reason, it's probably because one of those values is not present in your everyday life.
And do you think individual can have all 7 values that they can relate to? Is it possible?
It's a really good question. We do have all 7 as human beings. Now, the top
Oh,
3 tend to drive us in terms of the decisions we make every day, but actually all 7 are all present within us. If they're a little bit lower in terms of their presence within us, they probably don't necessarily show up as much in terms of when we're making decisions every day. So your top 3 will be different to my top 3, will be different to another person's top 3. But as we'll move on to talk about, being aware of what they are for us enable us to make those decisions about what we do each day in our lives.
all right. So you mean there are all the qualities present in every
Yeah,
human being at every
absolutely.
given time,
Yes,
but few of them could be dormant and few of
yes.
them could be violent.
Beautifully described. Beautifully described.
All right. So moving on, Andres,
Mm,
how do core values they actually influence our decision making with respect to self-coaching?
yeah, it's a great question. So I said before, these values are within us, and they tend to be within us from when we're teenagers, about 21, and they're really in there solid for us, shaped by our childhood experiences again. So the way that we can utilize them in self-coaching is if we become aware of them rather than just being unconscious within us, we can start to actually look about what behaviors we need to change each day in our relationships and in our workplace. I'm going to give you an example. My top 3 are political. I've got to remember them now. So it's political for me. I need the freedom. For me, it's about theoretical, learning all the time. And it's economic for me. So I need to be successful in whatever I choose to do. Now, if I have an option to work with a partner where I'm not particularly sure of their success at the moment, that's going to start affecting my judgment about whether I invest in the partner or not, or whether I explore with them, which might be the wrong or the right decision. But I just need to be aware that's what's coming up for me in terms of the way I judge the decisions I'm making. So, what I need to do in terms of a self coaching perspective is say, okay, Andrew, you know the economic perspective is a really important one for you in terms of value. You're not sure about the successful nature of this organization. You need to let go of that value for a moment so it opens your eyes to be open and curious about what is possible with this partner, rather than me just making a judgment that they're not going to be successful. So, what it does for all of us as human beings, if we become aware of our values, is start to work out where we're doing each day is working for us and where each day is not working for us, mainly because it's not aligned to our values. So, for you, for example, if I said to you tomorrow, you're in this office space, you're going to have to cope with all of this messy area over here, you're going to have to cope with the fact the desk looks like this, and it doesn't feel in harmony, that's going to disrupt you in terms of the way you perform. It's got to, because yeah,
Absolutely,
it's not going to
yes.
feel right for you. So we can
But
start learning about that and coaching ourselves.
that's true. I think I would be cleaning my desk first, then
Yeah,
later on open my laptop.
yeah, absolutely. That's why I love this. But it's raising the consciousness again. And there's been a theme through our series about becoming aware of what's
True.
important to us. There's no right or wrong. There is no right answer. It's about who are we and how we're showing up in relation to these. So
Absolutely. Wonderful. In fact, I think in this series, I'm getting to know a lot about myself. I'm really getting self-coached.
good, good.
And I believe all our lovely listeners are also enjoying it and are really getting self-coached. So thank you so much to all our lovely listeners who tune into every week, who probably watch us on YouTube also. Thanks a lot to them. So moving on, a lot of thanks. Thanksgiving, we have left Thanksgiving long back, but I'm
Absolutely.
still thanking everybody. So moving on, when we talk about core values, as in every episode, you always, tell us about some kind of software or exercises that people can identify their strengths, their values. So for this episode, for the topic of core values, what are the effective tools or measures or ways that people can realize their core values and identify them?
So I'm going to talk about 3 ways. One is very basic. We'll start with there. So if everybody understands the 7 values that we've talked about today, and you can go online and type in the 7 core values of Edward Spranger or the others, and just again get a description of each of them, is what I've described today. And maybe just sit with a partner or a buddy or a work colleague just to talk through each of the 7 values and have a chat about, well, what do you think mine might be and what do you think yours might be? And as you do, you related immediately to 3 that are important to you just by maybe describing them. So it's very easy for people to relate to those. And then just test it out with a few people, to actually get a sense of what those values might be for you. So that's a very empirical way of doing it. The second way is by talking to someone like me or one of the practitioners that's similar to me. There's a great profile out there called Discovery Profile. And the Discovery Profile, which we've talked about in the past, has a whole section on values. It's very cheap to access. and you can get a full report by answering some questions about your value profile. And that gives you a good sense. It's very detailed about the kinds of way that shows up and how you might want to think about changing it in the future, but it's very detailed. So someone like me or somebody else out there that is a practitioner in discovery, which is a product distributed by CCR3, is another way of doing it. And I'm very happy if people write to me or send me a note, I can point them in the right direction for that. And then the
Lovely.
third, no, that's fine. And the third one is you can go straight online, and I've written it down here, and it's called the Online Motivation Assessment. If you type in online motivation assessment into Google, you'll then get a page that comes up that tells you more about this profiling tool and how you can access it. So 3 different ways, very low cost if you want to go in more depth, but the best way to start with is have a chat with your partner or peer or colleague.
All right. So when you were describing all these things, the ways to basically discover or get to know your core values, I was just wondering, there are different phases in life. So do our past experiences or big events which change our life, because they certainly change our life, they change our thought processes, they change a lot of things in us. Do they also change our core values?
Great question. Again, love your questions today, Sandy. So the way to think about this is if we think about the brain and the way that it's hardwired by the time we're 18, 21 years old, that's been shaped by our childhood experiences. So our values are a key part of that. So if we have no big events in our life between the age of 21 and when we depart this planet, it's likely our values will stay the same unless 3 things happen. The first one is some really emotional event in life, such as the death of a loved one. It might be that there's a big relationship split where you have a lot of emotional trauma. And what that sometimes does is allow the individual to shift perspective on what's important to them in life. And it could be even a near-death experience where somebody suffered from a very severe illness, come close to actually, not being here, and then coming back and having a different perspective. So that's the first way that values can change for human beings. The second way that it can change is the environment around us changes. So let's say I'm working for an organization like Amazon, which we know is a very hard organization to work in. It's very structured and process driven. And then suddenly I'm put into a very different organization through an acquisition where it's not like that anymore. That again can have that kind of emotional impact on us where it changes our values because we see a very different way of working. But it's like that overnight. We see it, we feel it, we touch it, we hear it. So those 2 events can happen to us where our values change. But there is a third, which is a bit more progressive over time. If we start investing in our own personal development, self-coaching, self-leadership, mentoring, gaining coaching, we can identify 1 or 2 values that we want to change over time by changing our behaviors and our self-limiting beliefs. But that takes more time, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, sometimes a lifetime, to change our values. And that links back to your earlier point, why self-coaching is so important, because if I know that my life going forward is not well served by me having a value which is traditional, I need to find a way to actually manage that and change it somewhat so it's less prominent in my life. And that's why it's very important to understand these 3 events.
So that means no matter what we are born with and how we are shaped, things can actually change. Like they say,
Yeah.
change is the only constant in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. So, moving on, I would really like to know if there is somebody who feels disconnected with the core values. They have been trying to identify them, but still feel very disconnected with it. What advice would you give it to them?
Yeah, it's a great question. We know this feeling when we get it, and we all would have felt it at some point in our lives because there's almost a feeling of being lost. We don't know why. We look successful on the outside. People want us to be happy, but there's this sense of just feeling lost. There's something missing. And so when that happens and we have a disconnect, we can then start looking at our life and start looking at the values that we think are core to us and just see, are we actually able to access those values every single day in what we do? And if we are, it means the disconnection is for another reason. It might be something to do with relationships or the way we're behaving, but it's not values. If we can see that actually there is a missing disconnect, sometimes this can happen with a change in boss, by the way. So we have let's say the boss is allowing you to be your aesthetic value, and then suddenly had change in boss, and then it comes in, no, you can't work like that anymore, Sandy, you need to work like this. We can have a disconnect. So what I tend to find is that when people are disconnected from their values, without them even knowing it consciously, they tend to start to look for different roles in life. both personally and professionally. Now, where this can be very, very useful is if we're self-consciously aware of what our values are and where we're feeling disconnected, we can go to our current organization and say, hey, I feel a bit disconnected at the moment. I need to retain my aesthetic value. I need to be working in a team where there's more harmony rather than conflict. Can you engineer that for me? Can you make that happen? So it's a great conversation to have with HR or the business. If they can't, it then leads to a discussion internally. Do I need to leave this organization to go and find my values outside, either in another company where they will accommodate me living those values, or going on my own to be able to bring those values to life in my own business? So that's what I tend to see in people I work with. They sense the disconnection. It feels like this emptiness, and then they seek a solution by gaining those values again.
All right. That makes a lot of sense, actually, because once you start feeling uncomfortable about certain things in life, it is very difficult to carry on then.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as usual, in every episode, we always discuss about one of the success stories that you have seen. So when it comes to core values, can you just share a success story that you've seen in an individual and how it has affected their personal and professional life once they have realized what their core values are?
Yeah, this is a great example. And obviously, I won't name the individual, but it's somebody I worked with late last year. So they were working they weren't a British national. They were operating in a British business. It was a bank, a large bank in the UK, but they weren't British. They were very good at systems work and were very well known for it, but they felt this disconnect inside. And after having looked at their values and what their core values were, what they found is that those values could not be expressed within the organization they were working for. And so what this individual did was went and articulated to her manager to say, look, this is how I want to be in terms of these values. And for her, it was the political value, it was the theoretical value, and it was the economic value. Okay, so those were the three key things for her. And she couldn't live those values in that environment. So what she's done is she decided to leave that organization. Believe it or not, she's going to set up in India. She isn't Indian, but she's got an affinity with India. She's going to live her life giving back to sustainable projects in India as a leader, where she's going to connect people around the earth and sustainability. And that's very far away from the bank. But what she's doing is using her banking expertise and the experience she's got of financing to bring that to communities in India. Now, that's a big shift for her, but it allows her to live those three core values, which she couldn't live every day in the bank.
It's almost a paradigm shift, not just in
Absolutely.
career, but personally as well. Wonderful. And I'm so glad that there are so many beautiful, successful stories you have in store for us. And I'm sure
Absolutely.
they must be inspiring a lot of people who are listening to us right now that anything is possible in life, first of all. But once for that, you need to know your core values. Lovely. Thank you so much, Andrews, for these wonderful talks. And I think something that I really wanted to ask you this week, at least in this episode, is if people want to reach out to you, what is that way to get connected with you?
Sure. So the best way, the easiest way, two ways really, is if you just type Andrew Tallents, Tallents, into Google, you'll get my website, which is andrewtallents.com. Very easy. And on there, you'll see everything that we do, and you can connect with us there as well. The second place, if you want to see more material and more content about self-coaching, is to go onto our LinkedIn page, which again, if you just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn, there is only one of me, and you'll come up with me and see all the content there. I post every single day. There's things you can learn there. And finally, if people are interested, if they are part of the school community, SKOOL, which I know many people are aware of, we have a Self-Coaching for Leaders school community page. If you go onto that page and find Self-Coaching for Leaders, click on it, and we'll invite you to join the community as well, so you can learn with other people about self-coaching in a peer-to-peer group environment.
Awesome. Great. I'm sure the listeners who are listening to us right now and really want to reach out to you, probably they would be Googling all the things that you said right now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's lovely to have you. And next week, we'll be back with another episode on self coaching with another topic. And the topic is going to be more intriguing. I have a glimpse of it.
Super. I can't wait. Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you so much. Have an amazing day. And thanks to our lovely listeners and our lovely audience who always tune into Self Coaching series. Have a great day ahead.